Welcome to So You Want to Be a Real Estate Agent. If you are trying to evaluate whether real estate is the right career for you, wondering whether you are doing the right things to launch into quick success, or looking for tips and tools you can use today to become a more productive agent, this is your podcast. Welcome to So You Want to Be a Real Estate Agent. This is season 5, Success Stories. And we are on episode 4, I think, already. And we are so lucky today to have a very creative and seasoned top producer here with us. And by seasoned, I don't mean old. Kevin Grolig, you're not in our Learning from Legends, although you probably could have been because you're kind of like a legendary figure, at least in my mind, in real estate. I've known Kevin for a long, long time, and he has been a heavy hitter, very visible in the real estate world ever since I've known him. And I think part of that is like the creative way that you come at real estate. So I'm excited for everyone listening today to learn from Kevin about how he has succeeded to the level that he has, some tips and tools you guys can use, and maybe some advice some of us need to hear. So Kevin, thank you for joining us today.
Meredith, hey, thank you for having me. Honored that you would reach out to me to be on the podcast. So I'm excited.
Oh, totally my pleasure. My pleasure. All right, so let's get started with your background. What got you into real estate to begin with?
Wow. Okay, so we have a little bit of time, right?
We do.
Okay. So actually, I got in. I'm kind of a little bit of an anomaly in this business. I'm not sure if you're the same, but like this is really all that I've ever done. I got a license when I was basically 20 years old, and mid 50s now, so you can do the math. But yeah, I always knew that real estate was something I enjoyed and something that I was interested in. I'm a local product of Montgomery County. I grew up in Rockville, like in the Aspen Hill area. And actually, if you go back to my yearbook, it does say in there that I will be selling real estate. It's just supposed to be in California, and that never happened. I stayed put. I was true to real estate, but I never moved to California, at least not yet. So
I can see in California, you have that vibe kind of happening.
But yeah, so kind of why I was interested. So growing up, my dad was a firefighter, and he was a DC firefighter, and all my friends thought my dad was like the coolest dad in the world. You know, he had his boots, he had his helmet, he had his fire scanner, whatever, back in the day. That never interested me at all. And I had my godfather was actually owned at the time. This goes back to the 80s. A few real estate companies local, and I was always just kind of interested in what he did. And so what's interesting is that it was kind of my godfather who got me kind of nothing that he said. I just kind of saw from a distance kind of the real estate industry, and I had interest in it. My father, this is the crazy thing, he ended up retiring from the fire department, when he was after 20 some years, and he got into real estate after that. So he got into real estate like 2 or 3 years before I did. Wow. And most people think, oh my God, your dad influenced you. No, my dad actually, if anything, he almost scared me out of the business on my first day. So it was really, I'm thinking if I have to do that, like I can't do this. This is crazy. Anyway, so yeah, it was kind of like, godfather, family figure, in the business. It kind of attracted me towards it.
So I got to ask, what was it that first day that almost scared you out of the business?
Well, I'm going to give you the PG-13 version because once again, my dad was a DC firefighter, so he could be a little salty, but I will never forget this. Like he said to me, he's like, and I owned my own house at this time. I was 19, 20 years old, owned my own house. And he told me, he's like, hey, okay, so Kevin, here's what I want you to do. Tomorrow, you're going to come over to my house, 8:30. You're going to shadow me. I'm like, Dad, what does shadow mean? He's like, I don't know. I've just heard the word. And he's like, you're going to hang around. I'm like, okay, I can do that. And so he's like, you got to have a tie and blah, 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 blah. So I put on a suit. I did not know how to tie a tie. Went over there. He helped me tie the tie and everything on my first day. And I'll never forget this. It's like he's kind of telling me, he's like sits me down in his home office. He's like, okay, so the first thing I do is I do this. And he was running like all the listings that had come up, I guess, overnight. It was like all the new listings. And by the way, Meredith, I don't know how far you go back here, but I mean, this was the thermal paper, and
Oh, I remember where you had to like tear the little things off the side.
yeah, yeah. And it was like,
Yeah.
there were no photos. This was all like hieroglyphics, and it was like ridiculous. And so my dad keeps like, okay, first thing I do this, and then he'd look over his shoulder, he'd look at the list, and then he's like, okay. And then the second thing I do this, and he, look over his shoulder, and like then the third thing, and then the next time he looks over his shoulder, he said a bunch of profanity, which I won't repeat here. He's like, hold on a second. What? I'm like, Dad, what's going on? He's like, just I gotta call somebody. So I will tell you what he found out is that he saw that there was a client of his who he helped purchase a home 6, 7 years earlier. They were going through a divorce. They called in to tell him that they were going to be selling the house. He went through all what you would normally do, talk about pricing, talk about how to get the home ready and everything. And that's just where it was left. No signed agreement. But what he found out that day was they listed with another agent, which we've all been
Mm,
there. If you've been in the business long enough, it is
painful.
that could be soul crushing. But we've all been there and
Yeah.
everything. It's really how you handle it. And my dad didn't really do it textbook, and probably today would lose his license. He called up the person and completely berated this person over the phone. Um, and more or less, it was pretty bad. And he just hung the phone up, and he was so proud of himself. He hangs the phone up, and he's just like kind of like a proud peacock, like I told them. And I'm like, Dad, this is the first real estate call I've ever heard. I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I got to get out of business. Like I can't treat people that way and everything. And it's like, oh my God. He's like, well, Kevin, you'll learn as you get into business. We all have our styles. This works for me. And so, if anything, once again,
That's
to a
good.
certain degree, he was a mentor, but really not the mentor that I chose to follow. So
That's
it was kind
a
of like, don't
great
do
story.
this. What's that?
That's a great story. It's we have never actually talked about that particular thing that I can remember, at least on the podcast. And like
Mhm.
you said, this is something everybody will go through at some point in their career.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it is, like you said, it's soul crushing. It hurts. And it
It
is
does.
the first thing you want to do is call up that person and go, what the heck? Why?
Yep.
And find out. And even if your intent is to find out what you could have done better or differently, you can't.
Right.
We're not allowed to like go in behind the sign and contact the person, which is really, it's like one of the worst things I think about this business is that once that person signs with somebody else, they're not touchable by you anymore.
Right.
And
Right.
therefore you often don't have the opportunity to learn what it really was that made the difference. You can only like
Yeah.
guess kind of, unless you can find out some other way. But that is a tough thing. And interesting that your dad was like, oh, you'll get there, you'll see, and you saw it kind of a different way. One thing I do think, and I wonder if you feel the same way, that you kind of two things happen when you learn from those sorts of things, right? Like you learn about, I've learned that if that ever happens to me, it's on me. Like I did something that created estrangement or something. I missed an opportunity there to connect the right way. And sometimes it turns out to be the biggest blessing because you find out there was something else going on behind the scenes that you're like so
Right.
glad you didn't have to get mixed up in. But have you found that you've grown like a thicker skin as you've gone through
Oh
this?
my God. Yeah, I mean, you have to. I mean, you know, to all you newbies out here, this is a little bit like politics. It's running for office. I mean, it is shaking hands, it's kissing babies, it's pressing flesh, and not everybody's going to like you. I mean, and you're going to have your haters out there, and then you're going to have your people who just, what? They love you, they advocate for you. But
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I really had to get a thick skin. I mean, I did not early on. I mean, when I would hear people, I think early on I started a farm area, and I actually did quite well in the farm area early on. But then I would hear through some of my advocates in there who loved me, like, oh, this person's saying this about you, or this person. I'm like, and I wanted to be like, go talk to them, like, why are you saying this? But, it's just kind of like, and some of those people, by the way, that I did hear about, I ended up listing their home when the time came anyway.
Mhm.
Never had the conversation like, hey, why were you talking a bunch of stuff about me?
Right.
Or weren't, and maybe, who knows, maybe they weren't. But I mean, I early on, it was like, why would they think like, I mean, I know I've got pure, intentions and thoughts, and I'm going to work hard and I'm going to advocate for them. So like, why would anybody say something like that? But that's just the way things go. You're not going to please everybody.
Right.
And if you're a real pleaser and it's real important that everybody fawn all over you, then this is not the right business for that.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I remember at one point early in my career, one of my mentors said, the higher you fly, the bigger the target on your back becomes. And
Mm.
she was right. But I also learned that the same person said to me, just don't worry about what anybody else is doing. Just keep, adhering to your own North Star, and that's going to get you everywhere. And every time that little thing like comes up, and I'm like, well, why that person do that, or whatever. I just go, forget it, North Star. See it, and that's really held very true for me. It sounds like it has for you too.
Yeah, I mean, when you get those situations once again where you thought that you had something that was kind of like, hey, this is solid, I've got it, and then you don't get it. I mean, I always say, look, it's okay to have a pity party for a day. Just don't turn it into a week
Right.
or a month or a whole career, because some people do. Some people will like, oh my God, it only happens to me. And,
Right.
I'm so unlucky. And, this other person got lucky. I mean, there's, like you said, there's something going on behind the scenes. Once again, that's why I probably will get down for about a day, just because I do put the ownership on myself. Like something didn't connect. I thought it did. I must have misread something. And
Right.
and to your point, also, I've also found out after the fact, what, you're right. It was a blessing that I didn't get this to begin with, because this was probably something that had I known it, I wouldn't want to be involved with it,
Right. Exactly.
So.
Exactly. All right. So you're with your dad, shadowing from your dad, and he like a solo agent at that time?
Yeah, because back in the day, I mean, we're talking like circa 1988,
Oh
1989. I mean, there
yeah.
really wasn't any teams. I
Right.
mean, that was,
Way before that.
I started seeing that happening like in the early 90s, maybe mid 90s, So
Yep.
back then it was like there wasn't really a team. There were a few agents that might have a part-time assistant or so, but there really wasn't things like buyer agents and,
Right.
like there are today.
Yeah, yeah, everything was very different then for sure. Yeah, and teams really didn't even become like a thing, like a buzzy thing people were talking about until, like you said, somewhere in the 90s and then early 2000s, I think is when it really started to pick.
Yeah.
All right, so you're there shadowing your dad. Then what happens next? Like what were the major milestones that you remember on your way to success?
Yeah, so major milestones was really kind of having the intestinal fortitude to actually move away from my dad,
Mhm.
because once again, we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things. I love my dad, best dad ever, but from we were just very different in ways, and he was very harsh and abrasive, very much the old school, what you would think of, as a salesperson. And I guess maybe I was somewhat of a hybrid at the time, but I always felt like, I had to be with him at the company he was at and everything. And then, I decided to kind of go a different direction. I mean, we worked down in the White Flint area. We had an office there, and then I moved to Prudential, Preferred Properties. This is once again early 90s or so. I moved there up, and they had a location right there on Lake Forest Boulevard. And that was actually a really cool move for me, because first of all, it was kind of like independence. It was a little bit like getting away from my dad and being in his shadow and everything. Um, and also I started seeing the first like iteration of a team. There were it's funny, we had probably I guess 80 to 100 agents in that office. It was kind of a big office at that
Yeah.
time. And there were a lot of big hitters there. At that point in time, who, had like an assistant, maybe started bringing in a buyer's agent. And it's funny because like, I was probably in my mid 20s or so, started doing a deal or two here or there. Maybe I was doing a transaction a month.
Hmm.
And there were agents there that were doing 50, 60 transactions a year. But what I noticed once again is I noticed that the strong majority of them were at the coffee pot, hanging around, talking about the buyer and the seller that did them wrong. And, we'd held an open house and nobody showed up. And it was just like the pity party. And it's just like, I'm like, well, okay, I'm seeing like these 4 or 5 who have their own private offices probably had no idea who I was. I kind of felt like at the time, not that because they treated me this way, probably because I had an inferiority complex, but I kind of felt a little bit like gum on the bottom of their shoe or something. Like these are these like rock stars, you know. And then I see all these other people that are really just hanging around in the business. You know, a lot of them think came from, were either older and they'd retired from something else and they didn't really need to do well. And they were all reminiscing about the late 80s. Oh man, things were great back then, in 88 and 89. And I'm doing a transaction a month and I'm like, this is great. And I'm like, it was just I had a much different perspective because I didn't
Yeah.
know anything different. I kind of
Right.
got started in a tougher market. And so, and I also always kind of gravitated towards that minority that was doing well and watched them, even though they necessarily didn't take me by the wings and mentor me. I just looked at their actions in comparison to the actions of the people that weren't doing anything. And it just, for me, it just kind of started gravitating that direction. So that was like a big moment there because, I started seeing agents who were really doing a good amount of business, who started the first like generation of teams and everything. And that kind of inspired me.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. Now, when you were in that place, did it ever occur to you that you would build a team one day? Was that like an aspirational thing for you, or that you wanted to join one of them? What were,
Yeah, I think it was still a little early on at that
yeah.
time. I was still just kind of, I started getting to the point where now, okay, I'm maybe doing 20 transactions a year and I'm doing, 2 transactions a month. And so I don't know that I was really thinking about it then, Meredith. I just started seeing it a little bit,
Yeah.
wasn't really thinking about it so much. I was still kind of in that struggle and survival mode. I mean, I had kids and you
Hmm.
know I actually, one of the things too is, I for the first like 6 or 7 years I was in the business. I mean, I worked another job too. I worked at a grocery store in the evening times, and so I did real estate during the day, and then I worked at the grocery store 3 or 4 nights a week checking out groceries, hoping that one of my clients didn't come in there watching me check out, and come down my line to check out their groceries. That
Yeah.
actually happened once or twice. That was like mortifying. I'm like, I gotta take a break. I gotta go. Hang on, my friend. Like,
Oh,
um,
wow.
but yeah, I mean, I finally got to a point, where I could, going to the grocery store, even though it was union benefits and all that stuff, it was costing me money to go there. It became very obvious.
Yeah.
And so, kind of gave me the faith, to be able to leave that job and put myself 100% into the real estate.
Yeah. Yeah. And was that a game changer for you when you did that?
That was a game changer. And right about that time, too, right about that time as well, the company that I love so much, Prudential, was having financial issues. And, I don't know, I'm sure you know a lot of these same players, but, everybody wasn't, there was all this word on the street that we're either going to sell to Long and Foster or Weichert.
Yep.
And I was ready to go to a Remax brokerage. I mean, they'd already bought me, like all sorts of Remax paraphernalia. Like that, I was ready to go over there. Ended up that Prudential Preferred Property sold out to Long and Foster, and then they moved over to that area there where like AstraZeneca is now, and it's now official. Now it's the one that's in Kentlands.
Right.
So like I just didn't like the idea that I felt like I was getting herded like sheep, and it was just like
Mm.
I have to go where everybody's like, yeah, you going? I'm like, yeah, you know what? I don't think so. I don't really. At the time, their colors were brown and yellow. I'm like, I'm just not a brown and yellow guy. And I'm certainly not a fluorescent yellow dude either. So I was all set to go over to Remax. And then I ended up getting recruited by Charlie Llewellyn back in the day. And he was like the best salesperson I've ever met in my life and
Yeah.
outworked everybody else. And I ended up going there, much to the chagrin of my father, because my father's like, I hate those people over there. Um, I'm like, well, hopefully you don't hate me. And I went there, and that was also a really good experience because for me, I mean, obviously, Meredith, you're a huge farmer. They really preached the farming
Yeah.
there.
That's their thing.
Much more so early on than working sphere of influence.
Right. They almost had like a
Over time.
territory kind of like a philosophy, right?
Oh, it was oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It was borderline, yeah, cultish, but it Yeah, the reason my dad hated it is because we grew up in the Aspen Hill area, and that's where they were really strong
Yeah.
back in the day. And, my dad, when he first got into business, would lose a lot of business to Llewellyn agents.
Mhm.
They're walking out apple butter and doing all sorts of stuff and constantly
Ah,
knocking on doors.
yeah.
So I learned a lot there about, just once again, not being afraid to get face to face with people and, letting them know who you are, what you do over and over and over again. The whole idea of to reap to sow or sow to reap. But it's really laws of the harvest, things that have to be done. Like a farmer, if they just go out and throw a bunch of seed all over and they don't till the soil and they don't fertilize and get the proper amount of you know rain and all those type of things, I mean, you have no harvest. And
Right.
so I think once again, when you're farming community, it's like the best analogy, because if you cut any of those things out, yeah, you might get something here or there, but you're not building something. You're not going to get repeat business over and over again. So they
Right.
taught me a lot about that. And also kind of still relatively young, I mean, it helped me kind of be more bold,
Mhm.
and get that thick skin, as you said, by knocking on doors. I mean, physically knocking on doors. And I remember the first item that I ended up walking out. It was a fly swatter. Um, and
Everybody needs
the
this.
the flies. This one was really good. This one was a fly swatter that had like a hole in the middle of it, and it said on there, the hole in the swatter is to give the fly a fighting chance. Um, it said something like, "Don't take chances when it comes to real estate. Call
Oh
Kevin."
my gosh.
So it was one of the cheesiest things ever, but it forced me to get out there and meet people, and I had a door or two slammed in my face. I had some not so nice comments, but very few.
Mhm.
And the thing is, I learned the first time around who was just an absolute jerk, and I just didn't go there anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't need to be berated. And
Mhm.
then of course you also learn the ones who are going to talk your ear off. So it's kind of like, okay,
Right.
I got to put them towards the end because I'm never going to get out of here. And by the way, I'll put them towards the end and I'll park my car out in front of their house. I'll keep it running with the door ajar so that when they start, like, hey guys, like I'd love to keep talking, but car's on and the door's ajar. They're like, oh yeah. It's cool, man. You can go. You can go. So learned a few tips and tricks that way.
Right. That's cool. That's cool. All right. So you're like out there, you're doing your thing, you're getting bold about being in front of people. And I love what you said about you have to repeatedly show people who you are and what you do. And I'm going to come back to that
Mhm.
in a couple minutes. So you're at Llewellyn, and then what's ironic about the fact that it's Llewellyn is that for those who, and many of our listeners are not in this area, remember how Long and Foster, Penn fed about Long and Foster? Well, guess what? Llewellyn, fast forward many, many years, now is under Long and Foster's umbrella. Is that I'm not sure when you made your last move. Is that when you made your last
Yeah,
move?
that's when I went to yeah. So Llewellyn sold to Long and Foster in 2013, and unlike 20 years earlier, where I'm like, yeah, I'm not going there. I think at this point it was like, yes, I was part of the sale from Llewellyn over to Long and Foster, and I stayed there for 5 years. And I love that office. I mean, I felt like we had a lot of the I felt like we had a lot of the small boutique things that were good about Llewellyn, but we were also given, more visibility and some of the things that you can get with a big company. So I actually really enjoyed it working there for 5 or 6 years, because I felt like I was still working around a lot of the people who I'd been working with for all these years. And there was a comfort there. And I was one of the leaders there in the office. So yeah, I enjoyed working there,
Yeah, yeah. All right. So I want to ask you about the thing that I think people might know most about you if they hear your name. I always hear people go, if I mention your name or they mention your name, oh, the guy that does all the videos. So you have been really strategic and intentional, it seems like to me, in your video content creation and release. And you
Right.
were kind of innovative about it. I feel like you were doing cool edits, kind of like the more talking head style videos when people were doing different
Right.
things, using graphics and, just a different feel to your videos long before most of the rest of the real estate world caught on that video was
Mhm.
a way to scale, letting people know who
Right.
you are and what you do. How'd you learn to do that, first of all?
Well, I mean, of course, I knew in 2018 that a pandemic would be coming. No kidding. I did not know that. But yeah, with video, it was always something. So a few things with the video. Number one, um, you know, one thing I just knew that I could increase my reach by doing video.
Mm.
And when I started doing video, I started out really small. I mean, before I was doing YouTube and like Instagram Reels or whatever. I mean, I purchased BombBomb. I imagine you're familiar with
Oh,
BombBomb,
yeah.
which to those of you out there who don't know, that is an awesome software where, it's specifically made for video, for text video, for email video. It's a great product. So I kind of started with BombBomb first. And what I was doing was a few things on a smaller scale. I wasn't posting on YouTube yet, but what I was doing was, I was doing newsletters, for example, like, this is what's going on you know, in Montgomery County this week, and like a lot of realtors, I mean, they email a lot of canned stuff out there that
Mhm.
everybody knows you did not put together. I mean, it's just so obvious you didn't put it together.
Yeah.
So what I would do is I would just, and I didn't have all the time in the world to come up with all this content and everything. But what I started doing was like just announcing, like, hey, you know, there's 150 open houses this weekend in Montgomery County. I've got links to every one of them below, and I'd send out a newsletter, an email newsletter. By the way, weather's supposed to be great. I'm going to be hanging out at the Turnip Festival this weekend. Hope to see you there. Um, I'm
Yeah.
just making that up. I don't know if there is a turnip festival, but um, probably somewhere. But just making it genuinely me.
Yeah.
People knew that I was taking the time to do this, to research it, to whatever. I'd be silly in some of them, whatever, but just people would know that that's me. And so I started off just like doing emails to past clients, my sphere of influence. Each week with just kind of, hey, this is what's going on in the real estate business. This is what's going on in the town. You may want to check this out. I got links below, that type of thing.
Mhm.
And people reacted really well to it,
Yeah.
because it was me and they would reply back like, you're so goofy. Um, and You're right. And, so I started off kind of small like that. And then the other thing with BombBomb that I do, and I swear I preach this all the time, and so few people do these things. But like, for example, like in my CRM that I use, like, I've got most of my clients, not all of them, I've got most of my clients' birthdays. I've got home anniversaries down there and everything. And so, with BombBomb, and I can go into their app, on the phone here. I'm not going to do it, but I could go in there and I'd be like, for their birthday, I'd be like, hey, Susie, it's Kevin. And I just, I thought your birthday today. I wanted to wish you a happy birthday. Hopefully you have an awesome time, blah, 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 blah. Do something really fun, and I just send it to them and they're like, reply back. Cause it's once again, it's a video. It's not going on YouTube, but it's just going to that one person. And so I
Yeah.
find that video really humanizes you in a world where, humanity and humanization just really, it's hard. It doesn't exist in so many ways. This allows you that opportunity to get in there. Um, Also home anniversaries, like, depending on the client, if there's somebody that I can joke with, I can come across sounding a little creepy. I'll be like, hey, it's Kevin. Where were you this time last year? I know where you were. You were with me. We were at closing on your own house. And they'll text me back like, oh my God, you're right. It was a year ago. How do you remember these things? And so of course I wouldn't remember it. I mean, my CRM does because I put that in there and it prompts me. And then I just have to take that 30 seconds opposed to put out a video. And it's just like people are like, that's freaking phenomenal. So it's like little things like that. Like if you're afraid to do video, I mean, I'd say you have to question if this is the right business for you in 2023.
Yeah.
It's like just I kind of get it, but not really. I kind of get it. Like if you don't want to do it on social media and you don't want to I'm giving you very little leeway I am judging you if you're not willing to do that. But if you're not willing to send it to your friends and the people who already know and love you,
Right.
and then you really have to question if this is the right business for you. Because yeah, so um, the other tip I will give, and this is for seasoned agents as well, that you can do with BombBomb. And I'm telling you, do you mind if I keep rambling a little
Oh,
bit?
keep going. This is great.
Are you okay with that? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So Meredith, I don't know if you are in the business at this point in time, but when back in the day, I mean, when we would write an offer as a buyer agent for a listing, what was customary, and this is before emailing, what was customary is you're calling the other agent, and usually you're setting up a time to meet with that other agent and the sellers,
Mm-hmm.
either at the seller's house or maybe at the agent's office.
Yep.
And it gave you the opportunity to go in there and do a soft pitch
Right.
on who your buyers are. Hopefully you come across competent yourself, and
Mhm.
people, and you can answer some questions and everything. I mean, but once again, there was face to face.
Yeah.
And I also remember times too where this is crazy. It I've been on contract presentations where there were multiple offers, like back in the 90s,
Oh,
and
yeah.
like I'd go to the seller's house and they would say, "Hey, Kevin, thank you very much. If you don't mind, like going down to the basement,
Yes.
and we'll call you." And I go down to the basement. There's like three other agents
I
down
know. It's like being in an audition.
there, right? It's
What
like
are
you
you
almost
going
felt
to
like I felt like an expectant father waiting for the doctor to come out to tell me, if I had
Yes.
a boy or a girl or whatever. I mean, it was crazy. And then you get the call up and they're like, if you won, usually you're getting I don't really remember how it worked, but I do remember going downstairs in the
Yes.
basement with two or three other agents and just chatting it up for 30 minutes while the
Yeah.
seller and the seller's agent is up there chatting about your contract, or sitting out in the car, and there'd be six
Yes.
cars on the,
Yeah.
and you don't get that chance anymore, and I think as a buyer's agent, as buyer's agents, I mean, we are supposed to represent our buyers. And to me, I think just sending in a contract that's just emailed and that's it is a little bit
Mhm.
like if you hired an attorney going to court and just like emailing in your case. So what I do a video. Actually, I did one 5 minutes before we got on this. I do a video to the agent because I can't send it to the sellers, obviously, but I send it to the agent and I just say, "Hey, Meredith, first of all, I just want to thank you for kind of chatting with me over the weekend and helping me help my buyers bring the very best offer that we could. By the way, they wanted to convey to your clients, if you can, that they just really loved how they did the deck in the backyard, and they can definitely see their dog running around in the fenced yard. And it's just like, I mean, the house is just singing to them. And obviously, you did an incredible job staging it. So kudos to all of you. If you can just kind of relay that to the sellers, I'd really appreciate it. By the way, on this email, I've copied my go-to lender, so and so, on this. Feel free to reach out to him. But knowing him like I do, he's probably going to contact you first because, of course, I've had this all prearranged and
Right. Yeah.
everything. And most agents, like for example, if you sent me that, okay, I'm not forwarding that to my seller. I will take the PDF.
Yes.
Thank you for the thing. I will convey what I feel is appropriate to convey.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of lazy agents out there and they will just forward that along. And
All
so
the
guess
time.
what? I get FaceTime with their sellers.
Yes.
Um, and I have gone to closings and the sellers, I go in with my buyers, the sellers are there. And as soon as we come in, they walk in, they're like, "Oh my gosh, that video you sent just really kind of touched us and
Mm.
everything." And, I've had people say, we had higher offers, but we really connected with you
Mhm.
guys.
Right.
And so it's just like setting up once again a certain level of professionalism where this is a video that's made for basically just a very few people, the listing agent and maybe the sellers. And so I just feel like, start small when it comes to video. If you're concerned about starting a YouTube channel or whatever, great. If you have that bandwidth and you can be consistent, that's great. But start small with just sending out happy birthday messages and happy home anniversary messages and hey, I saw that your son just graduated college
Yes.
messages, things like that. People love that stuff.
Absolutely. That's
And
that's so brilliant. It's using like the idea of the sphere of influence being the lead generation pillar that most new agents are successful on first, and just taking that,
Mhm.
like think about, Facebook, right? Instead of going in and just writing like happy birthday when somebody's birthday alert comes up on your Facebook page, take it one step further and send them the video. It creates a warm connectivity and a level of
Right.
thoughtfulness that nobody else is doing. And that is just,
Right.
whether they ever do business with you or not, it's like it's just a kind thing to do as a human being.
Yeah, and it takes you 30 seconds and it just separates you from all the chatter that's out there and all so to me, like I say, if you're not prepared to do like things like that, it's like,
Yeah.
this is probably not going to be the right business.
Yeah, well, it's funny, the coaching ecosystem that I'm part of, Tom Ferry International, he always says like he's a big proponent of video, and he always
Mhm.
says if you're worried about how you look or come across on video, stop worrying about yourself. If you can get your out of your own way and just think about the recipient of the message, it can be a game changer. But if you can't get past that, we are in a service industry, and you're right. I think maybe reevaluate where you are. I can't
A
believe
service and for profit industry.
and that also, yeah, importantly so. Yeah. Yeah, this has been, I told Kevin at the beginning, this goes so fast. It's already been like, I think 30 minutes plus, but this has been such great content. You have given so many actionable tips to the people listening. And again, check out Kevin's video if you haven't followed him yet. Kevin, where can people find you online?
So, YouTube is my major platform, and you just type in Kevin Grolig. That's KevinGrolig. And I post a video a week, comes out every Friday, I think at 8 a.m. or so. But yeah, that's the kind of the main channel. But Instagram, it's at Kevin Grolig. Those are really the top two.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, you'll get inspiration and cool ideas, and just, seeing how Kevin does it is well worth checking it out. And if people want to find you to do real estate business with you or to talk about working with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Best way is by texting. And so my number is 240-793-7495.
Awesome. And you can see Kevin does a phenomenal job representing his clients too, really taking it one step further. No question at all as to why you have become as successful as you have. And we are so grateful for you sharing your story and your tips with us today. Kevin, thank you so much. This has been
Absolutely.
awesome. I will keep my fingers crossed that offer that had the video accompanying it gets accepted for you. And
Thank you. I appreciate it.
of course, thank you everybody for listening. This has been So You Want to Be a Real Estate Agent. We'll see you next time. We are so grateful you joined us today. If you've benefited from the advice we share on the show, we hope you'll tune in to our next episode. Interested in learning more about my personal mentoring programs, our Career Kickstart course, or to pick up a copy of my book, Farming for Real Estate Agents, your step-by-step guide for becoming the go-to agent in your local market? Visit www.meredithfogel.com and click the Resources tab. If you are curious about becoming part of the List Realty family of agents, go to the www.thelistrealty.com website and click Careers from the About Us page, or find me at the Meredith Fogel team on social media. Thank you for listening. This has been So You Want to Be a Real Estate Agent. We'll see you next time.